Turkey is preparing for a move that could reshape the balance of power across the eastern Mediterranean. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party is drafting legislation that would allow Ankara to declare an exclusive economic zone, extending as far as 200 nautical miles from Turkey's coastline. On the surface, this looks like a technical maritime dispute about energy rights and sea boundaries. In reality, it directly affects NATO cohesion, European energy security, control over gas-rich waters, and the long-running rivalry between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. The most important detail is that this dispute is unfolding inside one of the world's most strategically sensitive maritime corridors, where overlapping claims, military deployments, and energy competition are already tightly compressed. The proposed legislation would give Erdogan broader authority over fishing rights, offshore drilling, mining activity, and the establishment of marine parks in disputed parts of the Aegean and eastern Mediterranean seas. The timing matters because the eastern Mediterranean has become increasingly important since major natural gas discoveries were made over the last 15 years. Fields discovered near Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus transformed the region from a relatively secondary energy zone into a potential strategic supplier for Europe, especially after Europe tried reducing energy dependence on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Turkey argues that it has been systematically excluded from regional energy arrangements despite having the longest continental coastline in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece and Cyprus, both European Union members, support maritime claims based heavily on island boundaries under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, commonly known as UNCLOS. That convention allows coastal states to establish exclusive economic zones extending up to 200 nautical miles from their shores, although overlapping claims require negotiated settlements. Turkey has never ratified UNCLOS because Ankara believes the convention unfairly favors countries with large numbers of islands close to another country's mainland coast. Greece possesses thousands of islands across the Aegean Sea, including several located only a few kilometers from Turkey's western coast. Under the Greek interpretation, many of those islands generate their own maritime zones and continental shelves. Turkey rejects that framework and argues that continental shelves should primarily be measured from mainland territory rather than islands situated directly beside another country's coastline. This disagreement is not theoretical. It affects control over shipping lanes, fishing grounds, seabed resources, offshore drilling rights, and military access. In some parts of the eastern Mediterranean, competing claims overlap almost completely. Turkey also disputes the maritime rights claimed by Cyprus, arguing that the internationally recognized Republic of Cyprus cannot unilaterally exploit offshore resources while the island remains politically divided. Cyprus has been divided since 1974, when Turkey intervened militarily after a coup backed by the military junta ruling Greece, at the time attempted to unite the island with Greece. Turkey maintains that its intervention was necessary to protect Turkish Cypriots from potential violence and political exclusion. Greece and the Republic of Cyprus described the operation as an invasion and occupation. The northern third of the island eventually became the self-declared Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized only by Ankara. Despite lacking international recognition, Northern Cyprus continues to claim rights over offshore energy resources around the island. These disputes intensified after large offshore gas discoveries changed the economic significance of the region. Cyprus licensed international energy companies to conduct exploration in waters claimed by the Republic of Cyprus, while Turkey sent drilling ships and naval escorts into contested areas. The European Union threatened sanctions against Turkey over drilling activity. particularly during periods of heightened tension between 2019 and 2021. At several points, Turkish and Greek naval vessels operated in close proximity, raising fears of accidental military escalation between two NATO members. The current proposal from Erdogan's AK party appears designed to reinforce Turkey's legal and political position before future negotiations over maritime boundaries and regional energy infrastructure. Ankara also wants to signal that Eastern Mediterranean energy projects cannot move forward without Turkish involvement. This includes pipeline discussions, undersea infrastructure, and future export routes connecting Mediterranean gas reserves to European markets. The broader geopolitical environment also explains why this issue is re-emerging now. Europe's search for alternative energy supplies after the Ukraine war increased the strategic value of Mediterranean gas reserves. At the same time, Turkey has tried balancing relations with Russia, NATO, the European Union, and Middle Eastern states, while pursuing a more independent regional foreign policy. Erdogan's government increasingly frames Turkey as a central power that cannot simply accept arrangements negotiated by European states without Turkish participation. One possible scenario is that Turkey formally declares a larger exclusive economic zone, while simultaneously pursuing negotiations with Greece and regional actors. Under this outcome, Ankara could use the declaration as leverage rather than as a trigger for direct confrontation. Diplomatic talks, NATO mediation, and economic incentives might eventually produce limited agreements on energy development or maritime coordination. The United States has consistently encouraged dialogue between Greece and Turkey because both countries remain critical NATO allies positioned near the Black Sea, Middle East, and Eastern Mediterranean. A second scenario is more destabilizing. If Turkey expands drilling or naval operations inside waters claimed by Greece or Cyprus, tensions could rapidly escalate. Even limited naval incidents between alliance members would create serious pressure inside NATO, particularly during a period when the alliance is already focused on Russia's war in Ukraine and instability in the Middle East. The European Union could revisit sanctions discussions, while energy companies may delay investments because of rising political and military risk. Another important factor is domestic politics. Erdogan has historically used maritime disputes and sovereignty issues to reinforce nationalist support inside Turkey. Greece also treats maritime boundaries as a core national security issue tied directly to territorial sovereignty and defense planning in the Aegean. That means political leaders on all sides face internal pressure not to appear weak during negotiations. The Eastern Mediterranean dispute is ultimately about far more than sea boundaries. It reflects competing interpretations of international law, unresolved historical conflicts, energy competition, military positioning, and the changing balance of power between regional states. What happens next will depend on whether Ankara's proposed legislation becomes a negotiating tool or the foundation for more assertive maritime enforcement. The deeper issue is that the Eastern Mediterranean is becoming one of the few regions where European security, Middle Eastern energy politics, NATO strategy, and unresolved 20th century conflicts now overlap in the same narrow stretch of water. That convergence is what makes every legal move, naval deployment, and drilling decision increasingly consequential.